Title: The Ash and the Vow. Here, 116,666,666. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The Archivists of Ash walked alone across the burned continent, a stretch of land where sunlight bowed behind soot, and every city bore scars in both stone and soul. In his satchel he carried vows, literal scrolls inked by the leaders who had once ruled this land. Most were broken, some were blood-stained. One bore his own name. He had made a promise to protect the city of Brault before the fires came, and when they did, he fled. Now, years later, he returned, not to reclaim leadership, but to account for what was left. The vow made flesh was waiting. She had survived the inferno, led a band of children through smoke and starvation, forged order from chaos, not with law, but with example. And she remembered him. Chapter 2. They met at the edge of a black spire, where a council fire once burned. "I am not here to lead," he said. "No," she replied. "We're here to learn what that meant." They walked together through hollowed halls and built squares. She showed him gardens growing from ash, wells drawn from stone, and every person greeted her with nods not of fear, but earned trust. He read her vow written in coal and birch bark. "I will stay when it burns." She had. He hadn't. He expected her to rage. Instead, she handed him a shovel. Dig. Chapter 3. He did, for days, alongside former enemies, hardened orphans, and the very elders who once scorned him. No one asked for forgiveness. They asked for food, shelter, time, and he gave it. One morning, they unearthed a sealed vault beneath the ruins. Inside, an archive untouched by flame, maps, oaths, ancestral records, hope unburned. He handed her the seal. Brault once his. She refused it. "You carry it now," she said, "but not for power, for promise. Adversity doesn't weaken bonds, it welds them." The archivist etched new vows into the ash. Stone columns of the hall. They were built together, not to lead, but to remain, and to rise again, only with all. Title: The Thread That Binds. Year: 116,538,004. 161.4. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The city of Surith claimed to be united. Its banners waved from every tower, 1,000 hands grasping a single golden thread. But below the surface, two cities existed. Above, the marble gray, gleaming with wealth and order. Below, the rootways, lit by fungus and resentment. The uncut thread walked both worlds. No one knew where she came from, only that she carried no weapons, just a book of unmarked pages. She appeared at border markets, offering to bind wounds others wouldn't see, and vanished before her name could be cursed or blessed. Chapter 2. When the council planned the Wall of Harmony, a euphemism for sealing off the rootways that thread acted, she left messages written in wax across both districts. A wall is only peace for those on one side. She began small, refused to use the upper trim without paying the lower tax, taught a child in the rootways to read with a textbook borrowed from a grid school, helped bury a stranger from the opposite caste. People watched, and when guards questioned her, she answered only with a page torn from her book. Unity without understanding is quiet tyranny. Chapter 3. The council passed the wall decree, but something strange happened. One by one, the builders laid down their tools, then the merchants stopped deliveries, then the lights in the upper towers went out, not from sabotage, but from disconnection. Someone had rewritten the power maps, and in their place a single symbol appeared, a golden thread running through both halves of the city. The tamer of impossible beasts was seen beside her on that final night, whispering, "You did not tame them. You reminded them they were never wild." The thread vanished again, but her book remained, now full, because those obsessed with control are often fleeing surrender. But surrender, the truth to kinship, to shared fate, is what makes city whole. Title: The Last Guardian of the First Flame. Year: 116,410,255. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. A Whisper from the Walls. It began with a whisper, a low murmur carried by the heap-licked stone walls of the sanctuary, a hidden citadel buried beneath the black mountains. Only a few knew of its existence. Fewer still could find it, and even they did not speak of it freely. The last guardian of the first flame, they called her, though she preferred no title. Her name had been forgotten by history and preserved only in code, etched into the bones of old machines and the rhythm of torchlit rituals. The guardian stood before the prime ember, its flicker constant, unwavering, but dimming with each year. It was said that as long as the flame lived, the world still remembered what it meant to care. She had dedicated her life to shielding it from enemies, from theft, and from the apathy that rotted nations from within. But even stone weathers, and she felt the erosion in her marrow. News came by runner, encrypted script on a scroll no longer than a knife blade. Her eyes flicked over the symbols, and her heart, long trained to beat steady, faltered. The burned pilgrim had returned, and with him the compass of complicity. Long ago, he had been her student, trained in the arts of silent sabotage and quiet healing, the two polarities of the espionage code. He chose exile. Now he returned with a tool capable of rewriting loyalties. She doused the prime ember in oils of ironroot and whisperspus, bolstering its endurance. If the pilgrim had turned against the flame, he would aim for the sanctuary first. Chapter 2. The compass and the crossroads. Night cloaked the mountain paths like mourning cloth. The guardian, clad in ebon weave, set to cross stones carved with the tenets of service. She remembered their lessons, how every mission began with a question, not an answer. Her question now: had the pilgrim come to destroy or to restore? She intercepted him in the ruins of the Watcher's Niche. A forgotten lookout crumbled during the Blight Wars. He stood among the rubble, holding a sphere of warm glass. The compass. "I see you still walk without shadow," he said. "I see you still speak in riddles," she replied. He offered the compass. "It doesn't force allegiance. It shows you where you've betrayed yourself." She didn't take it. Then why come? He looked older, not in years, but in where like a path walked too many times. Because I realized why I gave up when I left. The flame wasn't what I thought it was. It's not a relic. It's a mirror. And I can't protect the world if I can't face what I've become. She studied him, saw the fractures behind his eyes, the weight in his stance. She stepped forward and took the compass. It hung in her palm. "You want forgiveness," she said. "I want to help." They returned together to the sanctuary, not as guardian and traitor, but as keepers of different wounds, mended only by shared resolve. Chapter 3. The embers echo. The prime ember flared when they entered, soft, then stronger, reacting to their joint presence. She placed the compass on the altar beside it. It pulsed once, then dissolved into cinders that danced briefly before fading. "The flame accepted your return," she said. He knelt, not to worship, but to rest. It was never about the flame. It was about remembering what it lit in us. In the days that followed, they worked in silence, rebuilding the Western Corridor, mapping new encryptions, training messengers not with weapons, but with words that could disarm pride and awaken care. The Guardian understood then that helping others had never been about martyrdom. It had been about holding space for someone else's healing, even as you stitched your own wounds. When she finally rested, it was not in exhaustion, but in trust. The flame would burn long beyond her life. For now, she was simply a steward, not the last. Just one in a line of sacred choices made moment by moment, and that was enough. Title: The Lantern Keeper's Lament. Year: 116,282,051.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the mountain city of Grelthorn, lanterns never went out. They were lit not by flame, but by tradition, a flame more stubborn than truth and far less illuminating. The lantern keeper was an old man with crooked fingers and a crooked grin. He didn't light lanterns anymore. He told jokes to the ones that wouldn't light. "Maybe you're just shy," he'd say to the glass. When the avalanche came thundering like the gods had sneezed, the marble statues of past rulers cracked. But the lanterns flickered on, not from fuel, from spite, because adversity had visited Grelthorn, and Grelthorn lit itself out of pure defiance. Chapter 2. In the aftermath, officials debated reforms. But first they demanded silence. "Too soon to ask questions," said the Counselor of Stones. "Too dangerous to inspire unrest," said the Minister of Measured Moods. The lantern keeper held a vigil in the ruins. One by one, survivors placed broken things at his feet, not offerings, just evidence. A cracked boot, a torn satchel, half-burned ledger. He tied each one to a lantern with red twine and let them swing in the wind like bells. When asked what he was doing, he answered, "I'm teaching gravity to sing." Chapter 3. The Servant of Self. Sabotage coiled around the council's logic, hissing, "Let sleeping myths lie." But someone had lit the archive building on fire not to destroy it, but to reveal it. The soot revealed hidden inscriptions beneath the paint. Declarations of prior disasters buried by policy. It was a rebellion. It was remind. The lantern keeper stood at the city gate, lantern in hand, as hundreds gathered behind him. "The city needs a new story," he said. "And it starts with the line we were never allowed to write." In that moment, Grelthorn rose not in arms, but in understanding, because the pause before the rise teaches more than the fall itself. And when you learn it, you light a future no tradition can smother. Title: The Flame-Eyed Witness. Year: 160,153,845.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. Within the hidden archives of Onnet's Grand Library, where forbidden knowledge was sealed behind obsidian doors carved with warnings long faded, lived the flay, might witness, guardian and keeper of secrets. He moved silently through corridors of ancient scrolls, flames flickering softly in eyes that saw truth and deceit with equal clarity. The city revered knowledge, but had grown indifferent to its purpose. Scholars pursued understanding relentlessly, driven not by compassion but by ambition. Their hearts became cold repositories, their empathy sacrificed at the altar of detached curiosity. One evening, an urgent whisper disrupted the silence of the archives. The witness listened closely, a plea, soft yet piercing an echo from the city's edge, where knowledge without empathy had begun to unleash subtle terrors. "Weight does not make a decision meaningful, your courage does," he murmured, recognizing the urgency of his task. He stepped forth from shadowed halls to confront the consequence of wisdom devoid of heart. Chapter 2. The witness arrived at the outskirts of Ondeath, where towering machines of gleaming metal and crystal had been erected by the city's most brilliant minds. They hummed with a lifeless energy, pulsing relentlessly as they drained vitality from the earth below. The Chainbreaker, a figure known to shatter unjust bonds, awaited him, observing the unfolding catastrophe with sorrowful eyes. The scholars built without thought of consequence. The Chainbreaker said bitterly. Their knowledge became their chains. "It is not knowledge that binds," replied the witness softly, "but the absence of empathy." Together they entered the heart of the machines. Inside, scholars watched indifferently, consumed by their experiments. None looked up. None sensed the devastation brewing just beneath their feet. Chapter 3. Standing before the central core, the witness faced the lead scholar, a woman of brilliant intellect but vacant gaze. Her eyes reflected only the cold glow of dead, devoid of feeling or warmth. "You risk everything for understanding, yet comprehend nothing," the witness warned. "Knowledge is worth any cost," she replied coldly. "Knowledge without empathy can only destroy," he answered. He reached out, flames burning gently in his eyes, touching her shoulder not with force, but with a quiet warmth. She shuddered, suddenly flooded with visions. The faces of those harmed, voices of the suffering, landscapes scarred by indifferent hands. Tears filled her eyes, realization breaking her scholarly detachment. Outside, the machines stilled. Their hum faded into silence as the scholars, awakened from cold ambition, saw clearly the destruction they had nearly wrought. The witness departed quietly, leaving behind a city changed. On that, scholars began anew, guided now by compassion as much as curiosity. His duty fulfilled, the flay might witness returned to the archives, ready again to watch, to warn, and above all, to remember that courage, far more than knowledge, gave true meaning to every decision. Title: The Legacy of the Unnamed. Year: 116,025,640.9. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. Every year on the same day, the bells in Felwyn rang 12 times. No one knew why. No inscription marked the tower. No festival followed. Only silence. The one beneath all names lived below that tower, in a cottage grown from forgotten blueprints and inherited depths. They spent their days carving names into wood not for people, but for trees, rivers, winds. They believed in memory without monument, and when asked why they never carved their own name, they simply replied, because someday someone else might need the space. Chapter 2. A drought struck the lowlands. The city's leaders panicked, hoarded, blamed, but Felwyn did not suffer. Rain still came. Why? Because years ago, the One had rerouted underground channels. No fanfare, just quiet labor beneath foundations that had long been presumed solid. The herald of celestial rebellion arrived one night, a figure painted in comet ash and truth scars. They sought chaos, disruption, a new order born from the collapse of the old. But the One offered tea instead, and silence, and a map hand, drawn of every small kindness the city still lived upon. Chapter 3. The herald lit a bonfire in the square, expecting outrage. Instead, people brought benches, bread, stories. They did not need a revolution. They had already been changed by one who never asked for applause. That night, the bells rang 13 times. The extra toll was for the one beneath all names, who by morning had vanished. Only a carved plank remained at the tower base. Letting go as in losing its chosen. Years later, when Felwyn faced storms, it did not crumble, because its roots had been named, and what is named with care endures. That is how you leave a legacy. Title: The Unmade Tiller. Year: 115,897,435.3. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, Rise of the Zodiac, Series 2025. Chapter 1. On the fertile plains of Ondeath, where golden fields rippled beneath crimson skies, lived the unmade tiller man who worked soil and spirit alike. cultivating harmony in a land that had forgotten its unity. Known for his silent determination, he tilled fields once barren, nurturing communities fractured by isolation and distrust. A troubled wind blew across the plains, carrying whispers of fear and division. Villages stood aloof, each suspicious of the other, and collective prosperity had begun to wither. Yet the tiller persisted, guided by a single unwavering principle. The road of truth is always ablaze, illuminating even the darkest path. As twilight deepened, a shadow crossed the tiller's path, the Shadow Walker, a mysterious figure known for breaking illusions. His presence was both feared and revered, for he exposed truths others desperately avoided. "It's time," the Shadow Walker said simply, his voice like cold stone. The tiller nodded, knowing his peaceful isolation had reached its end. Tonight his true work would begin. Chapter 2. Together they journeyed from village to village, confronting communities wrapped tightly in suspicion. Each village greeted them with wary silence, their eyes narrow and untrusting. Yet the tiller spoke quietly and sincerely, his words seeds gently planted into hearts hardened by fear. At each stop he offered simple acts of kindness, repairing broken fences, aiding harvests, mending roofs. The Shadow Walker stood silently by, his mere presence a reminder that illusions of isolation must shatter for unity to flourish. Slowly, villagers began to notice one another differently, not as threats, but as neighbors sharing common ground. The boundaries separating them gradually softened, bridged by mutual respect and shared labor. Chapter 3. The culmination of their journey came at the central crossroads, a symbolic heart of the region. Here, the tiller gathered representatives from each village. Anxiety hummed heavily, anticipation mingling with lingering suspicion. "We strengthen ourselves by strengthening others." The tiller spoke clearly, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "Community values bind us, not merely in wealth, but in spirit." The Shadow Walker stepped forward, his voice resolute yet compassionate. "To live divided is to deny our own nature. Truth is ablaze, not for destruction, but for illumination. Let it guide you home to each other." Silence held momentarily, then fractured into gentle murmurs, tentative nods, and eventually genuine smiles. Boundaries dissolved into embraces and handshakes, unity emerging organically from genuine understanding. The tiller, seeing his mission complete, turned quietly away. Beside him, the Shadow Walker offered a rare, subtle smile. "You have tilled more than soil today," the Shadow Walker acknowledged. "You've cultivated trust. True prosperity grows from unity," the tiller replied, his eyes bright with satisfaction. They parted ways beneath the blazing truth of the bloodstone skies, knowing they had helped strengthen a society and perhaps even themselves. Title: The Silence of Stars. Year: 115,769,230.7. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The key that bites did not unlock doors. It revealed them. Buried doors. Forgotten doors. Doors people prayed would stay shut. She came to the township of Velen's End with nothing but a veil of crow feathers and a single phrase carved into the blade of her staff. "The stars never lie. We just forget how to listen." The townsfolk feared her, not because she cursed, but because she remembered. And memory was dangerous in a place built on unspoken wrongs. In the heart of town, the masked midwife of becoming whispered birth blessings under her breath, while burying the records of stillborn children and consecrated soil. But the soil had begun to cough them back up. Chapter 2. When a newborn vanished from the cradle, the key that bites pointed not at a beast or thief, but the town council itself. She led the villagers to the ancient well behind the chapel, where symbols of guilt stained the stone, and there, within a sealed crypt, they found more than bones. They found truths, missing children, altered names, laws written with ink that only disappeared under moonlight. The masked midwife met her there, not in denial, but in sorrow. "These were sins of silence," she said, "and silence is the loudest lie." They wept together, but tears were not enough. Chapter 3. A tribunal formed, not of judges, but of villagers who had once slipped away. They read the names aloud, buried the dead with proper rites, tore down the chapel that had silenced mothers, and built a garden over its ruins, where stars could be seen clearly each night. The key that bites vanished the next morning. All that remained was her staff, wedged between two stones, pointing upward, to a constellation long forgotten. The masked midwife stayed behind, her mask broken, her name spoken again without shame, because accountability does not erase horror. It sanctifies healing, and where truth walks openly, trust finally blooms. Title: The Ghost Walker. Year: 115,641,025.1. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the mist-covered foothills surrounding Undeath, tales spoke of a figure who moved unseen, a phantom known as the Ghost Walker. Cloaked in silence and shadow, he wandered unseen paths and secret trails, his presence marked only by the subtle change he left behind, a whisper of hope in a world fearful of change. The city below was ruled by oppressive powers who mistook strength for domination, enforcing control with iron fists and closed hearts. Yet whispers of rebellion lingered at the edges, where courage struggled quietly against tyranny. On this night, under the pale gaze of the watchful moon, the Ghost Walker stepped from shadows into an isolated glade, where waited the skyborn whisper, a being whose voice was said to carry truth upon winds of change. The strongest don't control others, the Ghost Walker reminded softly. They master themselves. Then let us remind Undeath, the whisper replied gently. Let them see what true courage can accomplish. After two, together, they journeyed into the heart of the city, unseen but felt deeply by those yearning for liberation. They moved through darkened streets, passing unnoticed by guards who stood vigilant yet unaware of the quiet revolution unfolding beneath their watch. At the city's central plaza, a grand assembly had gathered, citizens forced to listen to edicts that served only the powerful. Hidden within the crowd, the Ghost Walker whispered encouragement to trembling hearts, reminding them of inner strength. Meanwhile, the skyborn whisper lifted her voice subtly into the air, letting truth flow gently through the gathering winds. Slowly, a change rippled through the assembly, fear replaced by a quiet courage, as one by one, voices rose in gentle defiance against the oppressive rulers. Chapter 3. Facing mounting dissent, the city's rulers called for silence, commanding obedience through threats and fear. But the people stood resolute, strengthened by quiet bravery, and the whispered truths that had awakened their spirits. Stepping into the moonlit plaza, the Ghost Walker revealed himself, a quiet figure cloaked in modest courage. True strength is courage in action, not control. He spoke clearly, his voice resonating with gentle authority. Beside him, the skyborn whisperer soared gently into the sky, her form illuminated by moonlight, whispering words that carry hope and liberation. Inspired by their examples, the citizens stood firm, peacefully defiant. Realizing their power had shattered, the rulers retreated, humbled by the peaceful, undeniable strength of unity and courage displayed before them. The Ghost Walker and the skyborn whisperer departed quietly, their task complete. Undeath, now changed forever by acts of courage and inner mastery, embraced a new dawn, one guided by empathic unity and a strength born of compassion. Title: The Crooked Kindness. Here, 115,512,820.5. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. They called her the Crooked Kindness, not for her spine, though it curved like a stream between roots, but for her deeds, which never followed the straight roads of justice. She lived in the outer woods, where the hollow tree guardian once kept the balance between beast and man. That guardian was long gone now, the balance broken, and in its place, hunting parties, fire-cleared paths, and fear of anything wild. When a farmer's daughter went missing, everyone blamed the wolves, but the Crooked Kindness followed paw prints not with arrows, but offerings, bread, song, a ribbon from her own hair. She did not return with the girl, not at first, but she returned with understanding. Chapter 2. The child had wandered too far, fallen, and been guarded by a one-eyed bear whose mate had been slain by poachers the season before. The villagers wanted the bear dead. Instead, the Crooked Kindness invited them into the forest one by one to meet the creature. It did not roar. It bowed. It was old, weary, but still chose mercy. Some wept. Others turned away. But the hollow tree guardian, they whispered, had returned not in form, but in lesson. And so fences were taken down, feeding stations built. Children taught the stories not of dominion, but of kinship. Chapter 3. Years passed. The Crooked Kindness became more myth than woman. She was seen walking with foxes, whispering to wives, wet dowels, planting herbs in the claw-marked ground. The girl she had saved grew into a healer, teaching that gentleness does not mean weakness, and that to protect something smaller is to become something greater. In the center of the village now stands a crooked statue carved from a storm, awe-inspiring, not perfect, not proud, but kind, because compassion toward animals doesn't just save them, it reteaches us the art of being human without needing to win. Title: The Keeper of the Forgotten Threshold. Year: 115,384,614.8. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan, and Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the shadowed streets of Annette's forgotten district, known simply as the Threshold, crime seeped quietly through cracks like hidden poison. Here, survival often demanded compromises, blurred lines, and fractured loyalties. Yet, amidst the chaos stood the keeper of the forgotten Threshold, a guardian whose presence ensured stability and fairness in a place otherwise forsaken. The keeper, stern yet compassionate, had mastered the delicate art of setting boundaries, understanding clearly that order and harmony depended on clear limits. His reputation was solidified by deeds rather than words, enforcing unwritten laws with a balanced hand. Tonight, trouble stirred quietly, driven by desperation masked as ambition. A notorious figure, a tamer of impossible beasts, had returned, bearing schemes capable of unraveling the Threshold's fragile peace. The comeback is already written in the pause between failures, the keeper murmured, aware the next moments would define the district's future. Chapter 2. In a hidden chamber beneath a dimly lit tavern, the tamer confronted the keeper, his eyes gleaming with calculated malice. He sought control, wielding manipulation and promises like weapons, eager to exploit the Threshold's vulnerable. Why cling to rules that weaken you? The tamer sneered softly, gesturing dismissively. Boundaries are mere illusions, easily shattered. Boundaries protect what is valued. The keeper replied firmly, meeting the tamer's gaze without flinching. Without them, relationships and societies crumble. Above ground, tensions simmered dangerously. The keeper's absence left the district teetering precariously. Citizens watched anxiously, sensing the profound significance of tonight's confrontation. Chapter 3. Emerging from shadowed confrontation, the keeper addressed the gathered crowd, his voice calm yet resolute. Tonight, boundaries were tested, he announced clearly, eyes moving across anxious faces. Not all survived unbroken, yet their necessity stands clearer than ever. True strength lies not in dominance, but in respect and balance. From behind, restrained but unbroken, the tamer stepped forward reluctantly, nodding slowly in acknowledgement. Your point is made, he conceded softly. Boundaries protect more than they constrain. A quiet applause rippled through the crowd, recognition and relief mingling softly in the night air. The Threshold had faced its test, emerging stronger, more resilient. The keeper nodded once, satisfied yet vigilant. The district, reminded vividly of Boundary's critical role, now moved forward with greater clarity, its health and relationships strengthened by hard-earned wisdom. As dawn broke softly over Ondath, illuminating shadows with gentle light, the keeper stood quietly at the threshold, ever watchful, ever firm, the guardian of healthy boundaries and lasting peace. Title: The Reflection That Remains. Year: 115,256,410.2. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. The builder of broken time wore a pocket watch that ticked backward. No one knew how it worked, only that it rang not on the hour, but when someone lied. He arrived at the fortress city of Larn, where the walls were high, the windows barred, and the people polished their masks more than their mirrors. Leadership ruled from above a gilded tower that filtered truth into palatable decree. Entered the wandering monk. He spoke softly, but his questions rang louder than bells. Who benefits when no one asks why? They called him a trouble maker. So the builder found him, and together they listened. Chapter 2. The clock rang 19 times in one day. Each lie spoken not by villains, but by leaders afraid of revolt, ashamed of shortage, or unwilling to admit they didn't know the answers. At night, the builder climbed the tower. He didn't storm it. He rewired it. In the morning, the bells of Larn did not toll. Instead, they spoke. Voices, recordings, proof of falsified harvest counts, fabricated enemy threats. Silence blot with coin and fear. Panic surged, until the monk stepped forward and said, "You are not broken. You are bound, and honesty is the key." Chapter 3. The leader, her voice shaking, stepped onto the balcony. She admitted everything. She named the lies, claimed the choices, and offered her position to vote. The crowd was silent. Then one by one, hands raised not for her removal, but for her courage, because truth had returned to Larn, not in speeches, but in ownership. The builder left that evening, leaving behind the backward clock. No longer ticked, because now the people did. And the monk, he stayed, not as a leader, but as a reminder that the price of approval is the vanishing of your reflection. But honesty gives it back, clearer than before. Title: The Wild Myth. Year: 115,128,204.6. Era: Bloodstone Age. Author: Jeremy Levan. Rise of the Zodiac Series 2025. Chapter 1. In the rocky outskirts of Ondath, where history etched itself in scars upon the land, The wild myth walked, a storyteller whose words roared like storms and whispered like wind through ancient stones. With tales vivid and fierce, he reminded listeners of lessons once learned, now dangerously forgotten. Beside him traveled the masked one, a quiet figure draped in layers of mystery, who never spoke yet whose mere presence was enough to evoke profound reflection. Together they journeyed to Ondeath, drawn by whispers of a city rapidly losing its respect for history, blinded by present wealth and comfort. The past holds truths that shape our paths, the wild myth proclaimed boldly as they neared the city gates. Storms always end, but not all survivors remain whole. His words hung heavily in the air, setting the stage for the city's reckoning. Chapter 2. Within Ondeath's opulent halls, citizens gathered enthralled yet skeptical as the wild myth spoke. His voice, powerful yet compassionate, unraveled forgotten histories of hardship and triumph, reminding them of ancestors who had struggled so that their descendants might thrive. The masked one silently moved among listeners, his presence gently compelling introspection, drawing forth memories long buried beneath layers of denial and indifference. Resistance arose from those unwilling to confront uncomfortable truths. They challenged the wild myth fiercely, their voices defiant. "Why dwell on shadows?" a prominent citizen demanded bitterly. "We have prosperity now. Prosperity built on ignorance is fragile." The wild myth replied sternly. "Respecting the past strengthens our future." Chapter 3. The wild myth's tales spread quickly, igniting passionate debates across Ondeath. Slowly, thoughtful reflection replaced heated arguments as citizens recognized truth and wisdom in respecting history's lessons. In the city's central square, a final gathering convened, eager yet solemn. The masked one stepped forth, removing his mask slowly to reveal a face bearing deep scars, a stark embodiment of history's harsh lessons. A hush descended, understanding settling over the crowd. "We are shaped by storms endured," the wild myth declared solemnly. "Respecting history doesn't bind us, it guides us forward with wisdom." As the gathering dispersed thoughtfully, the wild myth and masked one left Ondeath quietly, knowing the city had begun to learn anew the essential lessons of its past. Ondeath, forever changed by their visit, embraced history's teachings, knowing now the importance of respecting and learning from what had come before, ensuring lasting stability and meaningful prosperity.